Well, hello, everyone. We'll give it about a minute or so for everybody to start joining. I see the recording has started. So, for those that are here or those that are watching on the recording, this chapter, this class today is about making the sales call. And in making the sales call, we've talked a lot about, up until this point, gathering information, getting ready, understanding the dynamic of personality styles, looking at ways to prepare, um, looking at the emotional intelligence, what's happening under our own hood. Um, Lots of different pieces up until this point. And that operative word we talked a lot about is that adaptive selling, to be able to be flexible enough when we're communicating with somebody to adapt our style, to not just be like one way, but to notice. We talked a lot about body language, right? If you remember, we talked a lot about the nonverbal signals, in addition to ways to be a better listener, to ask questions. And so as we go through this chapter, making the sales call, you'll start to see, because all those skills that we talked about before are now being, I guess I'll say, unleashed, are now being used, are now being applied in real time. And we'll talk about sales calls, not just, face to face, but virtual. And then we'll get into some if you're making a group, right? And think about this from your perspective as well. Again, maybe you're not in sales, that's okay. Maybe you're being sold to, right? A lot of the assignments that I read were about um, products or services that we purchased and how we went through the buying process. And so you can kind of see that as we talk about making the sales call, you'll see it's very similar to making a presentation, to making a connection with somebody new, um, to talking to somebody at work that you need to make a good impression on, to connecting. We talked about networking, to be able to meet new people. So you'll see the skills that we say and we use in making a sales call are very relevant to our lives in other places. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind. So, learning objectives, specifically what is going to happen um, when we make the sales call. So, things to think about, right? We need to have the operative word here in that first statement, a good impression, right? And to gain the prospect's attention. You're talking to somebody. You want to make a good impression. You don't want to, we'll talk about this. What if you walked into a sales call or you walked into an interview and you had a cup of coffee with you? Yeah, it had a lid on it. But what if accidentally you spilled it? That creates a mindset going in to that talk. Um, you obviously want to develop rapport. That's huge. And that will help you increase your credibility. You want to make a connection, right? We talked about building rapport with others and how that works. And we talked about the importance of credibility in ways that, yes, you're doing your homework ahead of time. You're finding out what the prospect or the potential prospect's needs are, right? Some of their interests. And that will help increase our credibility because we'll know what we're talking about. Don't have to be perfect, but it helps to have a good game plan. And then think about this. There's going to be a lot of objectives here, but understanding the prospect's needs, right? All that homework we do ahead of time that we talked about. We can get some on social media, we can get some from people we know, we can get some from doing research on the company. Again, if it's somebody that you're familiar with, that might know somebody you know, you have a connection already to talk to that person. If it's somebody you don't know completely, well, that is even more important to develop some specific information that might help you in the process. And then think about this, we want to be effective, right? We want to be effective as we are talking about our product or service. So if you're selling consulting or software, obviously you don't want to, be all over the place. And we'll talk about this in terms of like dumping features. No, you want to be effective. You don't want to waste a lot of time. They only give you 10 minutes in a sales call. You want to know what's most important. So you're not talking about 27 things and only 2 are relevant to the buyer, right? And then you want to talk about, which we did, making adjustments. Why is that important? Adaptive selling, adaptive communicating. If you get good at changing things up, even if you don't know a particular need of a customer, or you're not sure, you're talking to somebody and you're just not making a connection with them, something's happening and it's just the rapport is not building, you can make adjustments. We'll talk about that, right? And then recognizing that adjustments are needed, right? You have to be aware that you're not connecting. Maybe you're aware that you're not getting the information that's relevant. Um, and then we'll talk about selling in a group. And that's a little different dynamic because there's multiple people. And so you might have multiple needs. Remember, we talked about this going in. What are our objectives, right? We might have objectives for us, and then our boss might have objectives for us to make sure, and then our company might have objectives. Well, if you're selling to a group, there's probably more than one need. There's probably more than one objection to your product or service. There's probably one more point of view. There's probably more than one personality style. So it takes a lot of adjustments to sell and be effective in a group, or even just making a presentation at work to a group, right? You know this. I mean, I don't have to, spend much time on it. It's pretty evident. Um, and so I like this graphic because it just kind of gives us the steps of a sales call, those essential steps, the elements. And obviously, there's a lot of stuff in between, and within each one, there's a lot of things we'll talk about. But initially, not only making a sales call, right? You're meeting somebody new. You're connecting with uh, a who knows, somebody you don't know yet, that's potentially you're looking for a car, right? So you're making a sales purchase. And think about how that person connects with you and how those that maybe they don't. And you can kind of get a sense of when you go into a store and you're looking to buy something or a service, you can kind of see then you're kind of like deconstructing how, if it's not going well, maybe there's something that's not there, that's missing. And you can kind of see. That's why we leave a store when we're not getting what we want, right? Um, so the first thing, obviously, make a good impression. That's important. No matter who you're talking to, no matter what the situation, sales, not sales, connecting with somebody for a job interview, meeting somebody for the first time, you're looking to hire a service provider. You want to make a good impression too, right? So think about ways that that happens. We'll talk about that. Obviously, you want to identify need, right? And if you've already found out some needs, you want to reiterate the needs. You want to talk about them. Is this still important to you? When I was selling in the textbook business to professors, I would meet with them multiple times. And just because you met with them a month ago and they had all these needs that you were able to uncover, You want to make sure when you go in there again, Professor, are these needs still relevant to you? Oh, no, something changed. I got a new class that I'm teaching now, and I'm not teaching that other class. Boom, everything shifts. And maybe they have brand new needs, so you have to start over. So it's important when you're identifying needs, again, this flexibility, because you're going to see more than likely the person that you're connecting to more than once. Okay. Remember that life cycle of a buyer process we talked about. Could take a year to make a sale or more. Right. And then we want to, the next category that's relevant, that's essential is think about this. We're going to offer solutions. We find out what the most important needs are. And hopefully we do a good job of offering solution to the buyer's needs. Right? Basic things, but you kind of see where these are the elements of a successful conversation, not just a sales call. And then I don't know if this is so much like put at this stage, because credibility and trust is built from the beginning, right? If we just show up at a prospect's office, knock on their door, and expect to be seen, is there a lot of credibility and trust there? Are you developing rapport? Now, maybe that's the way things work. Sometimes we make cold calls. We'll talk about that. You might know what a cold call is, where you have never seen that person before. Maybe you're selling a particular product, and you drive by a hardware store and you think, wow, maybe they might want to purchase what I have. So you make a cold call. And we can get good at doing that. That's harder because, as the name sounds, cold call, we don't have information ahead of time. But if we're really skilled about adaptive selling, we can uncover needs in that cold call. Okay. And then everything we're doing is adjusting. We're adjusting to the buyer's reactions, and we're making adjustments. That's what we're doing. So it becomes this process of making a good impression, moving through the steps to eventually uncover need and to build the trust and credibility throughout, and to keep adjusting so that eventually we make a sale. They buy our service. They buy our software. They buy our products. They buy our consulting or coaching practice that we want there. Okay. So this is a really good kind of, I like alliterations when we say things like, okay, the 4 A's of the selling process. It kind of makes things a little bit easier. And think about this again. If you're even interviewing for a job, or you're at your company trying to get a promotion, and this is a way you might have to sell yourself. So think about these categories, these 4 A's: acknowledge, acquire, advise, and assure. Okay. Acknowledging, very beginning, what are the needs? Who you are, who they are, what's important. Acquiring more information through good questions, good listening. Advising, if you can build credibility with who you're talking to, they look at you as an advisor. So there's less of a, we'll call it, tension point. They're trying to sell me something I don't want to be sold to. No, if you're, think about this. If you come and they think of you as an advisor, well then, wow, I have a problem that needs to be solved. I'm going to be more willing to talk with the salesperson, right? And then the assure piece is, again, that credibility. Do you know what you're talking about? Can you handle my service issues? It could be a long-time salesperson. You know this client. You've had issues. You've had your customer service problems. Can they be assured that you'll get their needs met and you'll get all those problems handled? Absolutely, that's important. So let's get into some of these components in that chart of what's the essential pieces, okay? Because this is important. And again, think about this, regardless if you're a salesperson, from the standpoint of you're connecting with somebody for the first time in whatever situation, want to make a good impression. So it comes into this impression management. How do we do that? How do we make a good impression? And basically, you think about it, a lot of it has to do with your actions, your activities that you engage in to give the buyer an impression of who you are. So that's the impression management, right? We'll talk about things like that. How you dress. Again, if I wore a cutoff t-shirt and I'm teaching this class, you'd have one impression of me as a professor. Maybe if this was a class in, I don't know, rock and roll music, that would be acceptable. But this is professional selling. And so I want to dress the part, right? We talked about that, dress. That's one way to manage an impression. Thank you. And think about this too. If we're talking really fast and we walk in, we talked about rate of speech, right? If we're talking really fast and we come into a presentation, yes, that can mean we're excited, but they may think, oh my God, I can't understand them. They're talking too fast. It's overwhelming. Is that a good impression? Now, we can't be perfect with this, but we want to be aware of what's working and what's not. We're making a good impression. Okay. So these are kind of like what we should be doing. That word should is not the greatest of choices of words, but more often than not, these are the things that we need to be creating and making an impression on in this way. Okay. Be on time. How many people have friends, okay, or relatives that are never on time? You know those people, right? You're waiting at the restaurant, they're 10 minutes late. You're waiting for them to call, they're 5 minutes late. You're meeting them at wherever, the park, the store, they're 20 minutes late. Or the opposite, they're very early. I have a friend, well, he's not a really good friend, but he's in a group of, we have a monthly poker game with like eight guys. And we have somebody in the group that shows up 20 to 30 minutes early. That also is uncomfortable for the person that you're talking that's hosting. So if it's a fine line here, right? You're showing up for an interview, you're showing up for a job interview, you're showing up for a sales call. You want to be early, but not so early that there are impressions made that, oh, they must be very nervous. They showed up 2 hours ahead of time. Now you can wait in your car. There's lots of things you can do. You don't have to like walk in to the office right away. But think about this. If we're going to be waiting, right? What are we doing while we're waiting? If we are early, can we make good use of that time? Review your notes, be prepared. Maybe if you're nervous, you do some breathing practices, which we talked about in that first class, right? Take deep breaths, feel the breath moving out, the exhale. Do that for a while. Visualize something that makes you, feel successful, feel confident. There's a lot we can do when we're waiting instead of just like surfing the internet on our phones, right? Which could be okay. But again, we don't want to be too unfocused when we get to the sales call. And we need to keep things in perspective here, right? Realizing that our time is valuable too, and their time. So if they make us wait a long time, there comes the point where we'd walk out, right? I've had this happen. The potential prospect is making me wait. So then what I do tactfully, I've done this before, is I will write a note and leave it with the secretary or whoever's in the office and say, I have another appointment, even if I didn't. I need to be somewhere. Maybe I need to prep for my next call. So there's always something to do. And so you can't just hang around. They have to respect your time as well as a salesperson. And so it becomes this, okay, how long do I wait? What's the proper time, right? It's gray area. It's a judgment call, but you need to figure that out ahead of time, right? You need to have boundaries. And so how else do we make a good first impression? Think about this, identifying their social style. We talked about that, that matrix, analytical, amiable. If they're a driver, they want a lot of facts. If they're analytical, they want more facts. So maybe they don't want to hear about your vacation that you took in Hawaii and the 12 places that you went and all that you did. Maybe they're really focused. Now, if they're amiable or expressive, maybe they do want to hear about that. Think about, and you might not know what personality style they are, right? But if you do your homework ahead of time, you might have an idea. And again, you can kind of feel your way through it, meaning be flexible, adaptive, right? You can get a sense of, oh, they're turning their head every time I talk about something that is, I would think, not exactly relevant to the sales call, but personal. You can say they're getting squeamish, right? The emotional intelligence to be able to read another person's body language is important. And all this is helping you develop rapport because that helps you make a good first impression. You want to not be seen as a difficult person when you're walking in their office, right? And so, or when you're talking with your boss, do you want to be seen as a difficult employee? How was that impression, right? So you want to have the proper perspective. And again, this is a thing we have to be careful about. But you could have a sense of humor when things go wrong. For instance, you spilled the coffee. Tell you the story. So when I was, and I'm still doing some professional speaking, going to companies and businesses. So this was about 20 years ago, and I was being interviewed by a local newspaper. They were doing a story on professional speakers. They came to my home, and I greeted the reporter of the newspaper in my home, and I had a new dog. I would say he was about 2 years old. Okay. And he and I started doing the interview process. We built rapport. Think about this. We built rapport. We're having good connections. He's asking me questions. He's listening. I'm listening. All of a sudden, hopefully you're not eating right now. If you are, put your food away. My dog throws up all over the floor. In fact, he throws up on the reporter's shoe. What do? Oh my God, right? It's like, but there could be a sense of humor in that. Now, you have to have a good sense of self to understand that. Obviously, I'm cleaning up the mess and whatever, but here's what I did. Because the way a lot of my messages when I'm speaking is being able to turn frustrating situations into fascinating situations, to be able to use the mind in a more helpful way. So I talked about this as a story, and I said, wow, obviously it's, and I helped him clean up his shoes or whatever. I said, he's doing an interview on professional speaking. And so I'm talking to him about what a great story this would make in talking to an audience and how I was able to remain calm, keep calm in a crazy situation. And he got it. He was like, wow, I understand now. You're really good at professional speaking because you take what happens, even if it's a unpleasant event, and turn it into something usable. So we kind of laughed about that situation. And so then that becomes good perspective of using something that goes wrong. It doesn't always have to be humor, but it's how you view things, right? How you frame things. And you can get into a sales call or talking to a potential client or somebody at work, and it goes horribly wrong. You have a choice. You can look at it as horrible, or you look at it as, how can I use that? Frame it in a way that will be helpful for you, makes all the difference. Because if we get in the mindset of woe is me, I'm no good, how effective are you going to be as a salesperson if you start hating on yourself? How effective will you be as a communicator if you get down on yourself because you made mistakes, because you pronounced something incorrectly, or because you forgot something, right? We have to be able to, there's that word again, be adaptive, adjust. And adjusting is being able to recover when we make a mistake. A really good, strong salesperson is not one that doesn't make mistakes. A really strong, good, effective salesperson is able to move through their mistakes and be able to recover, not necessarily immediately, but to be able to use what just happened as learning and to grow from it and to be more experienced even in that moment. And if not that moment, the next time, right? So that's what it's about. Okay. So that's a good impression. How do we gain a customer's attention? How do we gain attention with somebody we're talking to? Now, I purposely slowed down my speech so you can see it causes you to pay more attention. If I keep doing that, you'll get annoyed, but it becomes this ability for you to tune into what I'm saying in a particular way because I'm pausing, because I'm emphasizing things. If I was very monotone in my talking and I continually talk like this, and I teach the class like this, and I go through the same pace and the same vocal tone, that's not going to get your attention. Well, it might get your attention in a bad way, right? It might turn you off. And then that becomes an issue, right? So, what I want to make sure is I want to grab my customer's attention so that they're paying attention to me and not this, okay? Or not another employee. Now, what happens? People get distracted, right? And again, you need to be flexible and navigate distractions. We'll talk about that after. All right, so let's talk about getting a customer's attention. Obviously, that we talked a little bit about this, social media tools to generate interest before the sales call. So there are, we'll talk about that. Um, the first few words, this is kind of interesting. People say like the first 15 seconds, there's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of psychology in what we're doing in terms of how we make a connection. Okay. And that first impression in that 15 seconds is powerful. So within that, there are two things to think about. The halo effect. The halo effect is a psychology term. And it means if you think about like a halo, well, that's a good thing on somebody's head, right? An angel. It's a way the person that you're talking to would frame you as a knowledgeable, credible, good person. So the manner in which you do things can change their perspective. Again, you walk into somebody's office and you trip. Now, you might not think anything of it, but they might think, oh, salesperson's a klutz. Or you have a briefcase and you're looking through it to pull out your notes to share with the prospect. You can't find them. They might think you're unorganized. You walk into their office, you walk into the building, and you're feeling confident, you're smiling, and you're carrying yourself in a really good way, they might say, wow, this person knows what they're talking about. Okay, so that's called the halo effect. When you're talking to somebody, anybody, not just a sales call, they're making that impression on you and you're making that impression on them. What could you do? Think about this. What could you do to impact that first impression, to get their attention in a positive way, not a negative way, right? We don't want to be, them thinking we're klutzy, but stuff like that happens, right? Um, and this is the opening, right? We talk about the opening. This is a way to get our prospects' attention. Opening could be verbal. Opening could be you showing them something. Opening could be how you enter the room. There's a lot of pieces to the opening, okay? The opening might not have anything to do with your product or service, but it might be an introduction to you and your company. That could be an opening. How you gather their attention and what you put their attention on, that has what they focus on, that becomes a really important thing. So how do we, like openings, right? There's a lot of different ways to open a conversation. There's a lot of different ways to open a sales presentation for a salesperson or a sales call. So you can have the basic introduction. Hi, I'm Professor Corbin. Good to meet you. Jimmy Smith. Okay, simple, right? Does that generate interest? Probably not, unless their son is named Jimmy, right? And maybe that does. But simple might be appropriate. Okay, if there's not a lot of time, simple might be appropriate. Referral opening. Think about this. Your head of marketing, Jamel, recommended I talk to you. That automatically, now if Jamel is not a good employee, well, then that becomes an issue. But if Jamel is respected and this person, this buyer knows of that person, wow, okay, instant credibility. Jamel, they're introducing, okay. It gives you a little bit of trust immediately as you're walking in the door. You might open with a benefit of your product or service. You could talk about you have software. You are the most, we'll call it, reliable software in the business. So your opening that you talk to the client, to the potential client prospect about, feeds into that your software is extremely reliable, or your service of your company is tremendous, or you have a good value for your product. You could tie that in. You could have a product opening where you're demonstrating your product. That could be very effective. You're selling, I don't know, shoes. You pull out your shoes. Maybe you're selling running shoes, and you show them all the cool styles, right? That could be effective. Compliment opening. Wow, you know what? I'm so excited to, be talking to you and your company, because your company is the best, company selling X, and to have an opportunity to offer you my service is really exciting to me. And so I've been using your company's product for 2 years, and I want to share with you my service. That could be flattering. It's got to be sincere, right? If you're lying, if you're just kind of, we call that, remember that word puffery? You're puffing them up with not realistic or truthful things, they'll see into that, right? But that's a good way to open. Or you open with a question. Are you happy with your current service provider? Knowing that they're not. Well, or you know what? Another question. Like, I, get them to think about the price of a product. So your opening could be a question based on, are you happy with how much you're paying for your service right now? Again, knowing that they're probably not. And that starts a dialogue, right? This is a really good graphic just to kind of think about ways we can open a conversation. If you're talking with somebody that you've not met before, your friend is introducing you to another person, How do you how do you start a conversation? Find shared interest, right? Introduce yourself, shake their hand. Hopefully you don't forget their name. That happens. So there's ways to remember names. Remember we talked about that. Um, Especially in that book that I shared with you that I think Naran shared with us, um, Never Eat Alone. And there's ways to talk to potential new prospects that get their attention. That's what it comes down to. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, again, if you have questions, type them in the chat as we're going through this. But this is kind of basic things, but I want to give you some different perspectives about the basic, right? I think we all know it's important to have rapport with whoever it is we're talking to so we can be more effective. If we're a salesperson, if we are in a sales capacity, maybe we're a customer service person, maybe we're a sales engineer, right? Still have to have rapport with clients. So this is important to start to think about how we build rapport. What is rapport? It's a connection of trust. It's a closer connection of trust. And so when somebody trusts you, you can kind of feel that there's less tension in the room. If you can create rapport, there's less tension in the conversation. We're more at ease. We could think more clearly. And this should be, again, that word should is interesting, but I think this is important as we look at a primary goal to have, build rapport with whomever it is you're talking to. Your sales manager, somebody else at your company. We want to have a good connection with, and maybe that can't always be the reality, right? We're not friends with everybody. We're not having a good rapport with everybody. Maybe we had a disagreement with somebody at work. And so the rapport is kind of low. Maybe there's some things we can do to build it. Okay. So how do salespeople, how do we engage in not just small talk to be more effective, but how do we, this is interesting, scan the office? Think about this. How do we scan a room? I do a lot of speaking, I do a lot of training when I'm teaching a class. Obviously, I can't see your faces because your cameras are off. But when I'm teaching and in face-to-face, I scan the room for people, eyeballs, those that are more friendly. You could tell those that are smiling, those are communicating, or those that are a little standoffish. So when I walk into a room as a salesperson, when I walk into a client's office and I see 9 people, and one of those is the person I'm going to be selling to, but there's 8 other people in the office, I scan the room. I talk to those people. I want to make a good first impression. I want to build rapport with people in the office. That's important. My mother was in sales for many years. She was amazing at the skill, not just small talk, but connecting with people in an office. Now, she would be calling on doctors and to sell collection services like their billing. But she can't just see the doctor, right? There's office workers, there's assistants. She was amazing. We'll call some of those people gatekeepers, right? We talked about that. She was amazing at building rapport with those people. And she was so good at that. Those people then became advocates. They fought for her to get time with the doctor. They fought for her service. When you become really good at sales and you connect with people and build rapport with people, whomever it is in the selling process, not maybe the end buyer, but all the other people, that's powerful. So small talk is, yes, maybe I don't love that word small talk because it has a negative connotation, like chatter, right? But exactly, Winnie, it's like reading the energy in the room. Absolutely. And then you adjust to that. Beautiful. Perfect. And so this ability of small talk, we'll say it's like small communication. Okay, it's not necessarily small talk because you could just be listening to one of the employees at that company. That's it. And they might, if you're a good listener, you might be pulling information that you can use in your sales presentation. And they know that you're a good listener. And you make them feel felt. Literally, let me say that again. You make the other person, this is how you build rapport, you make them feel felt, or you make them feel heard. You make them feel seen, like they are important, because they are. And it's a powerful connection that builds rapport. So you could share goals, you could share your agenda, you could talk about hobbies and what's current in the news and mutual friends, certainly. But when I say small talk, I say small communication. I'm going to change that for the next class I teach. Because I think if we're good at listening, we can build really good rapport. We may only say 5 things in a 5-minute conversation. Literally. I do a lot of personal one-on-one coaching with athletes and coaches, sports coaches, and educators. And if I'm doing a really good job of building rapport, remember that 80-20 rule, 80% listening, 20% speaking. If you're doing 80% listening, you're building rapport. Think about that. Okay. So let's talk about other ways to develop rapport. All right. Maybe things we should avoid. Talking about politics, religion, age, etc. Again, it depends on how well you know the prospect. It depends on how well you know the client. But some places where we go in terms of conversation could be challenging. Think also about current events. There might be current events that are important to talk about and others that might not be. In the world of geopolitics, with so many countries at war with other countries, so many things happening, so many adversaries, depending on who you're talking to, if you're talking about one country, they may have a different opinion about them. And if you're thinking about making a good impression, you have to be careful. You don't want to turn them off, right? You want to be true to who you are, but you also at the same time want to be careful about what you talk about. So in this developing rapport, we're trying to gain sympathy. We're trying to gain, I would say, sympathy to a point, right? Because we don't want to, you talk about, avoiding the, oh, woe is me, okay, you go to the client, you start sharing the fact that you haven't made a sale in a month and you're not doing very well, and you're having a conversation about, I need to feed my family. I've had competitive salespeople go into a client's office, I found out afterwards, and them talking about how to generate sympathy. I haven't made a sale in a long time. My family, we need this sale. They're trying to do that. Is that effective? Maybe 1 out of 100, 1 out of 10. Not long term. Not something you want to do. Okay. When I found that out, I was like, wow, the salesperson is doing what? And this buyer, potential buyer, a client of mine, knew what was happening. So they shared it with me. They're like, can you believe the salesperson tried to do this? Right? It helped me develop rapport by not doing it. Think about that. Okay. Obviously, you don't want to complain. That's pretty self-evident. You don't want to gossip about the competition. You don't want to just say, you know what, they got crap products. I know 3 customers that I have that are new that were using that competitive product and was crap. You don't want to go to a potential client and say that, right? Because they may like that product. They might not be fully happy, but they like it. And you're just, trite phrases, you know. Um, again, be careful, to just sound like you. That's important. Don't try to be somebody else that you're not, right? Um, this is a really good graphic. I like this because it shows, root causes of need. And because I want to talk about how do we uncover need? As a salesperson, this is a critical skill. As a communicator, this is important, right? We talked about you might be able to get some information ahead of time in your planning. Remember, you set goals, you recognize your objectives. One of the objectives is you have to uncover a need. What is we'll call the root cause of the need? Why do they have the need in the first place? If you get good at that, you can get good at addressing those needs and be effective at communicating and selling whatever product or service you have. So there's the initial need that the buyer says, I don't like my current product because it's too expensive. That may be true, but they might have underlying needs that are more important. So you need, as a salesperson, so you need, as a communicator, to get to the root cause of the need. So we can look at, okay, the need behind the need. The need behind the need. That in itself is powerful. Think about this. You're talking to somebody. You're not connecting with them. It doesn't have to be a sales call. Could be an interview, could be somebody at work. You're not connecting with them. Maybe you don't know what the true need is. You don't know what's most important. You have to find the need behind the need. And it might be literally the need behind the need behind the need. That's the root cause. In the work that I do in the mental skills arena, we always talk about the thought behind the thought. There's this sponsoring thought. Like if you have a thought that you're not good at something, there is a thought behind that thought that puts that in your mind more often, a root thought. It's the same with a need. So if you can get to that root need of the buyer, of the potential prospect, you'll be much more effective as a seller, be much more effective as a communicator. So methods to uncover needs and getting at that root need. These are life skills. This is just not for selling. Okay. I think you know that as you kind of see this, one of the most powerful ways to be a good salesperson, to be good at connecting and building rapport, is listening. We talked about that. Okay. But if we get really good at communicating, we are really good at asking questions, targeted questions that go right to the core of a root need or a root want or a problem that needs to be solved, or of an issue in your family when you're talking to a child or a relative. If we get good at asking the right kinds of questions in the right way, and then we listen well, we're masterful at what we're doing. Okay. So we're going to spend a little time on open and closed questions. Open questions, we kind of know what those are intuitively, right? They require the person we're asking, the prospect, to go beyond just a yes or no. If you have kids, or, if you have, a niece or nephew or young ones, and they don't always, especially teens, they don't always offer information. If you go, how was school today? Closed question, fine. But if you open the question up, you get to encourage more information being shared. Tell me what you noticed about your day that was positive. What was challenging about your day today? What was the most difficult subject you had? What did you learn today? Open-ended questions. Engage, this is important, engage the person you're talking to. Causes them to think, causes them to formulate an idea based on your question. That's why if you get really good at questions, you can get really good at framing how your prospect thinks. Now, we may have watched, maybe we know attorneys, maybe we've watched dramas. I was watching a Netflix series called The Lincoln Lawyer. I don't know if anybody saw that, but it's about an attorney, a defense attorney. Masterful, masterful at listening, masterful at asking questions. Because they know if they ask the question in the right way, it frames the conversation. It frames the selling process. It frames the interview. Some questions are so open, they're difficult to answer, so we need to be prepared. You're going in the interview. The question everybody hates when the interview asks, tell me about yourself. Have you ever had that person, somebody asks you, tell me about yourself? It could be in a cocktail party. Tell me about yourself. That is so open-ended. So if somebody asks you that, gosh, you need to be prepared. What do you say? Right? Tell me about yourself. Well, I don't know. No, you have to be aware to know. So if you ask such an open-ended question to a potential prospect, you have to be aware. You don't want to put them at the defensive like, oh, that's so open. I don't know how to answer that. So there's this between open and close. Close are yes or no kind of questions. Doesn't have to be a yes or no. It could be, what's your favorite color car? Blue. That's pretty much a closed question. You might have two. Yeah, I like blue and I also like silver. Okay, there you go. But it's closed. There's not a lot of leeway for them to share information. There are times to ask closed questions. Do you want to buy my product or not? I don't want it to be them giving me a long answer. You're talking to the prospect. Did I answer all your questions? That's a closed question. Because they're going to say no. Okay, what is it that you still need to know? Do you still have any objections to my service? Yes or no? They're going to think now, if you haven't developed the rapport, they might just say no, and they still do. Therefore, you need to get good at skill, asking questions. Well, let me rephrase that. If it was in your power, would you buy my service right now? No. Okay, well, there's still something that you must need to know to make the decision. What is that? More open-ended, right? Adaptive selling, adaptive communicating. You get really good at using open and closed-end questions. You need to ask both. Okay. So sometimes we ask questions in a way that summarizes things, right? But it helps to use both kinds of questions. And we're having a conversation with a friend. I don't think normally we think about, oh, I'm going to ask an open-ended or closed-end question. But it might be a good place to practice, right? Friend is going through a tough time right now. You're going to want to ask a lot of closed questions? Probably not. No, what's going on? It's a hard time. Tell me about it. Open-ended. They'll spill their beans, usually, if you're a good friend, right? You're not having to say much. 80-20 listening to talking. Maybe it's 90-10. 95-5 could be an effective salesperson. 95% listening, 5% talking, if you're really good at asking questions. See, does that make sense? Anytime we're communicating in any conversation, we need to be aware if we have more of a tendency to ask open or closing questions and how that impacts the conversation. You may have friends that steal, maybe steal is not the right word, they hog most of the time in talking. You may have friends like that. Do they ask many questions? No. Are they talking a lot? Yes. What could you do to shift the conversation? Ask them a different question. So if we get good at questions, good at asking questions, we can shift attention and focus. What did you have for breakfast this morning? Think about that. What did you have for breakfast this morning? Did you even eat breakfast? What did you eat for dinner the night before? Those are questions. Did I get you, if you were listening, if you were paying attention, did I get you to think about what you had for breakfast? You know this, right? Questions frame how we think in the person's mind. Remember that. Powerful statement. Okay? Get good at asking questions. We can start to frame how somebody thinks. Just like those attorneys, those lawyers, and those shows or in real life. That's what they're doing. They want to get the jury to think about things in a certain way. That's what they're doing. We want to get our customer, potential prospect, to think about things in a certain way. Good questions. So there is a method of sales called spin selling. Neil Rackham wrote a book called Spin Selling. I don't know, in the 1980s, I believe, late 80s, 90s. And it's a classic book in selling. I don't know if anybody's heard about it before, but think about this. From the standpoint of framing conversation and framing questions, this is a powerful process. SPIN is an acronym. SPIN is an acronym that stands for 4 types of questions that you can ask to elicit different kinds of answers. Situation questions are the essence spin selling. Tell me about your current state of service right now. Situation. Are you open to looking at a new product or service? Situation question. How much money do you have in your budget? Situation question. What is your time frame? When do you need this? Situation question. P in spin is for problem question. What issue do you have right now? Why is your current product not working? You called me, you wanted me to deliver a presentation. What is it about your current product that's not giving you exactly what you need? Uncovering need, that's the problem, right? Maybe they'll tell you, the service, they had good products, but then all of a sudden they stopped servicing them. I can't get them fixed. That's a big problem. You gear your questions targeted to that issue, right? Implication questions. We'll get into each of these a little bit more in depth. Implication questions. You've been using this product for 2 years, and this is what's happened because they didn't service it in the way you needed. That's an implication question. Need payoff questions. That has to do with, okay, if you continue to make this a priority in your decision making, servicing the product. That's important to you. What is the impact that that has in the long-term relationship of your product? Reliability is important. Okay, I get it. Sometimes people just want price and they don't care that it breaks in 3 days. Most people want reliability, but there's a payoff, right? We need to find that. Think about this. These techniques of types of questions work. They work in major sales, they work in minor sales. What is a major sale? Major sale is like construction equipment. It may involve a long selling cycle. There may be a large commitment of $6 million. You may have to have an ongoing relationship for 3 years before you can get into the business. There may be a large risk because if they're giving you $6 million, wow. One of you in the class here shared a assignment piece on the buying process that they were the procurement person for their company in logistics, and they had to procure 6 rental cars. That could be a major sale or a minor sale, but these rental cars were there for a year. So it was probably a major sale. That takes time. If you're the person that is trying to sell that service, rental cars, to the potential buyer, that's a major sale. Thousands of dollars over the course of a year. So let's get into some of these. What is a situation question more specifically? And how would you use it? What kinds of things would you be getting at by using a situation question? A situation question, as I said, what we're trying to do is get, we'll call it background information, current facts, what's happening right now, buyer, with your current service. You're gathering data about the situation, about the experience of right now. Now, the next part, the problem question, is you get more specific. You're addressing specific issues, the dissatisfactions that they have. Remember we talked about the need behind the need. Think about how these questions get at the need behind the need, okay? We'll cover a few more of these and then we'll take a break in about 5-7 minutes, okay? Just give you a heads up. The implication questions. What is the point of those? Well, think about this. It's putting again, we talk about how if we ask a certain question, we can get our prospect, the person we're talking to, think in a certain way. This helps the prospect recognize what's really happening with the problem that they have encountered, with their current service, with their current product, with them not using your product or service, the potential problem they might have. Implication. It's like thinking down the road. You're getting them to think, if X happens, then Y happens. And then Z might happen. Oh my gosh, you're right. I do need this product. What you're basically doing is you're helping to motivate the prospect to look for a solution by these implication questions. You're talking to somebody has nothing to do with sales. You ask implication questions all the time. A friend is going through a difficult situation. What you want to do is try to help them uncover the problem as a good friend. So we're trying to motivate them to see what the problem is, or maybe you're sharing, or maybe you're just listening and listening for keys. You can ask a question, in a relationship. If you continue to go out with that person, what might happen? Implication question. Need payoff questions, again, focus on, it gets down to the usefulness of that problem. Need path questions are all about closing the prospect, the person you're talking to, on a specific point, because you're getting them to commit that, yes, this is important, or no, this is not important in the process of solving the problem. So that is important. Those are important questions. And so we'll finish with this statement here in terms of why would we want to use the spin selling? The book in chapter 8 goes into a little more depth than we will cover in spin selling. If you're interested, if you're in sales, if you're really wanting a great framework for questions, that art of asking good questions, Neil Rackham, Spin Selling is a great resource, okay? The advantages, we encourage a prospect with these kinds of questioning to define their need or the need behind the need. We encourage the prospect to view us as more of a consultant, an advisor. Remember that we help them instead of being a pushy salesperson. We're an advisor, we're a consultant. They trust us. We're not here just to make the sale. We want the relationship. We want to build their trust. And it becomes here, the conclusion is for best outcomes, the salesperson really should practice how to ask these questions. Again, if you're good at asking questions, you're good at communicating. If you're good at asking questions, you're probably a good listener. You're good at being able to pick up insight that can help you. And we could all be better at asking questions. Always. We can always get better at listening, always get better at asking questions. Spin selling is a really good resource to kind of look at that. All right. So let's take 10 minutes. All right. I don't know if you're at the top of the hour. We're almost like at 8 after, according to my clock, like 7 after the top of the hour. So we'll take 10 minutes, stretch, get something to eat, do what you need to do. I'll see you back in 10. We'll finish this chapter. As I go through this now, I kind of think we might not even be able to get into the presentation process, which is the next chapter. We'll see. I don't want to keep you beyond the 2.5 hour mark. So, all right, take your 10. I'll see you in 10. Bye for now. All right, welcome back, everyone. Mohammed has a question, and I wanted to get to before we move into the conversation further here. And I've been using the word prospect. Sometimes I use the word client, but he wants to. Why are we using the word prospect instead of customer client? That's a really good point. And part of it is when we're making a sales call, I'm taking the perspective that we haven't sold to this person before. Okay. I could just as easily say they're a client and I'm the salesperson making their, another call to them on a regular basis. We could use the word customer, right? I think there's a lot of words here that we could use to define who we're talking to. And so if I key in on Mohammed, if I key in on prospect, I'm not doing it to exclude a customer or client in that as well. I have to take like a point of view. It's like, but thank you for bringing that to my attention, because what I'm going to do is try to introduce those other words as we continue to talk. In the way that the book talks about, remember that funnel, right? There's potential leads, and they come down to a prospect, and then it filters down to hopefully make the sale, and they become a customer. So there are different pieces in the selling process where people are at. Prospect, we haven't sold to them. But we could have sold to a prospect if we're then selling something else. So they might be a prospect and a customer, a potential prospect. They could be a client as well. A long-term customer, I would call a client. In some businesses, they're all clients. In a professional group like an attorney or an accountant, they call them clients because it's a service provider. So sometimes if it's a service, they look at more of a client as opposed to a customer, which is more a product. So it depends. I'm sorry, that's the kind of the thing. But like I said, what I'll do from now on is I'm going to be more aware. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, to use some of these words more interchangeably. Okay. Does that answer your question, Mohammed? So one is not better than the other. They're just for a different occasion. Okay. So let's look at some additional considerations in terms of building rapport and connecting these questions, as we talk about things as a salesperson, as we're gathering information about needs. What else do we need to be thinking about? Okay. Some of these are pretty basic. Some of these maybe we haven't thought about before. So here's the thing. If you're a salesperson and you fully define and identify all the needs of the prospect before the sales call, right? We talked about doing all that homework and trying to find out about the potential customer, right? Is that good, Mohammed? Or a potential client, or if they are a client, doing ahead of time. What we want to make sure we do is, like I said, if we identify needs, we want to make sure they're still relevant. Like that one professor I talked to, and I'm seeing them, and then a month later, they're changing their focus. And then so all the stuff that I uncovered before is not relevant anymore. So you always want to be, this is a type of question, need checking, like situation checking. Anything changed, right? That situation kind of question. Anything changed? We should consider the fact that the buyer has access to more information. It's kind of like we should consider that the buyer has access to more information about our competitors than we might know, or more information about their budget than they're letting us on, or more information about who else needs to be in the decision making. So if we kind of think about and consider this, there's always more information I don't have yet. It kind of puts you on I need to continually check to make sure I have the right information. And that's not a bad perspective. It's not like you're, questioning yourself, but it's always like you're checking in with the client, the customer, the prospect. Is this right? And then ask new questions. Has anything changed? And maybe you'll uncover something you didn't know before. Now, the number of questions that we need to ask depends, right? If we're uncovering the need behind the need behind the need, we're going to need to ask multiple questions. If we figure out there's only one need and it's like we uncover it right away, it's a little more simple process, may only need a few questions. So it always varies. The trust, we talk about trust. Sometimes there's sensitive data. Sometimes a friend tells you something they don't want you to share with anybody else. Sensitive data. They're not going to just tell you that if they know you're going to blab to somebody else. A customer, a potential client, a prospect might not share information right away, but if they start to trust you, then they might say, you know what? I heard that my competitor is going out of business. They're having trouble paying their bills. And I'm going to need a new service provider. Now, I haven't told anybody else about that yet. It's kind of new. I just found that out. That's sensitive data. Are you going to share that with everybody? Probably not. Maybe your manager, but not other people. And And how much, this is kind of, again, that word should here, how much should you let the customer talk? Now, they could be one of those expressives or amiables. They like to talk. They like to talk about things that are not related to your product or service. That's okay. But you have to pay attention, because maybe it's a better situation to take them to lunch to talk. And then you could, or take them to the golf course or to a event, trade show. Then to waste 3 hours of your time just chit-chatting, right? It depends. You have to be, again, mindful of your focus and objectives, and mindful who you're talking to. So sometimes you don't want to encourage somebody to talk if you know they're going to steal the whole time. Sometimes you want to be a little bit more to the point, right? Redirecting, being adaptive. That includes being adaptive to the situation that's going on. I only have 10 minutes to sell this customer. I have another client that's in the wings that's waiting for me to talk to, potential client. So I need to be careful how much time I give them to speak. I might still be 80-20, asking questions, listening, but more targeted questions, more focused questions, as opposed to open-ended. Maybe I'll be in the middle. Okay. So we'll talk a few steps here for our presentation, right? Presentation is, okay, here's my stuff, here's my service, here's my product, here's my software, here's my coaching service. When we are presenting what it is we have, we need to keep in mind a few things. I mentioned this earlier. Feature dumping. Do we want to waste all the buyer's time by spilling out the 97 benefits, the 97, not benefits, features of your product? You're selling phones. How many features are on this device? Dozens, right? Dozens. Is everything on this phone important to me? No. A few of you in your assignment talked about the process of buying a new phone. Not every feature is important. If the salesperson is telling you every single thing about this phone, whoa, you might get turned off. You might get overwhelmed. You might be like, I'm walking out the door. This is ridiculous. I think a couple of classes ago, somebody was talking about the process. Forgive me, I forget exactly who it was. The process of buying a TV. And they went into the store, and the first salesperson was giving them every single feature. And they're like, whoa, that's too much, overwhelming. The second salesperson came in, was much more focused, asking good questions, right? Who did they buy from? Second salesperson. So feature dumping, not a good idea. Might there be a reason to use it? We want to confuse the person, right? If we're new in sales, if we're excited and haven't prepared, we're going to do feature dumping. We're interviewing for a job. They ask the question, tell me about yourself. You might feature dump. You might give them 12 things about yourself. Will that be effective? As opposed to talking about 2 things that make you better or more valuable an employee than the next person. Let's think about that, okay? Offering value. So there are these features, right? Everybody has things that their product or service or consulting does, but it's always the why. Why does that matter, right? What do I get from that? So there's features and then there's benefits. Both are important, okay? If we're selling value to somebody, if we're communicating value, we talk about the benefit. A person is not going to buy just on features. They're going to buy those features and what features mean to them, right? You're buying a new phone. Price is a feature. quality is a feature. The resolution on the screen is a feature. What do I get if it's a faster phone? Wow, I can connect to the internet quicker. I could do my work more efficiently. I can communicate and have a better connection with other people I talk to on a Zoom call. That's the benefit, right? We need to always be positioning the customer to see the benefits of our features. That's the job of a salesperson. That's the job of a communicator. Talking to your boss, you want them to see the good qualities that you have, not just the features of that, but what that means to the company, the value you bring as a benefit. That's what we want to be talking to. We're not going to ignore features, but we always need to make sure that we're speaking to both, relating features to benefits. Okay? So I mentioned this word just a few moments ago, value, offering value. When we relate features to benefits, we offer value. Okay? Again, I like acronyms, so it kind of gives us this way to think about things that's easy to remember. All right? So there's the FAB and there's the FIBA. Okay, when we're offering benefits. Just kind of a silly way to think about it, but it kind of, okay. The FAB is this overarching, how do we offer value? We have our features, we talk about the advantages of that, and the benefits. Boom, boom, boom. Kind of a process, like if we're talking about one piece of a feature of a service that we have, why is it good? Why is not having it a problem? And then the benefit. Here's what you'll get from that. Boom. That brings the value. The FIBA here is kind of interesting because the FIBA is this process the salesperson will go through: feature, evidence, which is like, why do they care? Right? I'm not just going to share all these features, but I got to find the need behind it. So there's got to be some evidence why that feature is important. When I found a feature that's important, then I talk about the benefit. And then you get agreement. Potential customer, potential client, is this important? Is this the most important thing? Is there anything else? Boom. So you mention the feature, you provide evidence that that feature that you have can be shown. You get that with my service, you get that with my product. You explain what that does, the benefits, the why, and you ask the buyer, does that make sense? Do you see the value of that? If they say, no, I don't, then you need to do a better job of explaining the benefits, providing evidence. Or you need to be a better job at uncovering, maybe you're talking about the wrong feature. Yeah, you thought that was the most important thing, but it wasn't. There's another one that's more important. You got to uncover that. Right? Good questions. You'll keep asking, you'll keep digging. It's like a detective. They keep digging until they uncover the mystery, until they solve the mystery. And even after they solve the mystery, there might still be questions to ask. They're always asking questions. That's what they do. Detectives would be great salespeople, I think, right? And vice versa. Great salespeople might be a great detective because they're good at asking questions and listening and uncovering needs. Okay. So problem solution model. This is I see Ashraf has a question. Go ahead, Ashraf, take yourself off mute and ask your question. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask what if in case that his most important features that I'm not able to satisfy him in that. I'm not able to meet his sometimes maybe I have many features, but the most important one for him that I'm not able to meet, like long credit time.
Yeah. So in that case, that's a really good question. Really, really good. Thank you for sharing that with us. So you might have a product or a service that does certain things, and the prospect, the potential client or customer that you're talking to, you might literally, as Ashraf said, you might not be able to meet that need. So that's a little advanced in sales, but we'll talk about that now. I think it's like in a couple chapters, but here's the skill. What you want to do is to be able to limit, there are ways to do that, how important they feel that is to them by showing them some of the benefits that they still would want, and you maximize those benefits in their mind that your product or service can offer them. So you're shifting focus. You are trying to, if sometimes you don't have the right product or service, okay? But if you're really good at sales, you might be able to fit something that you have that's pretty good and satisfy most of their needs. Maybe not the big need, maybe not the A+ need, but you can satisfy 5 of the B+ needs, the secondary needs. And if you do that, maybe the prospect will understand that, the potential clients, the potential customer will understand that, wow, this really is a good service. Yes, it doesn't do everything I want, but hey. So example, like you're going to buy a car, right? There's lots of features and benefits in a car. Maybe the most important thing, I've had this happen, I wanted a particular color. To me, that was like, I had to have the color because the last time I bought a car, I didn't get this color and I was kicking myself. They didn't have that exact color in the car that was available. So what did the salesperson, actually, what did I do? I kind of turned it in. Yes, that's the most, I really want that color. Can't get it. But there's 5 or 6 other needs that are really important that I focused on. If we're good at sales and we can do that, we could still make the sale, even if we don't have the ability to satisfy that A1 need. Ashraf, brilliant question. Thank you for asking. Assessing reactions. So remember how we talk about the nonverbals, right? We talked about reading body language, emotional intelligence. So we need to assess when we ask a question, when we talk about a benefit, if the prospect is giving us this, remember the closed arms and leaning back, or they're eager, or they're disinterested, they're looking away, got to kind of assess what's going on. And you ask another question, you probe. Verbal probing sounds kind of nasty, but what basically is, you're asking questions. So trial close, for instance, you're trying to find if the potential client, customer, prospect will buy. You might say, you might offer the product and say, which one of these 3 do you want? It takes 2 weeks for delivery. We need to have some lead time. Which one do you want? Oh, well, I'm not ready to buy yet. Okay, that's a trial close. But what it does is when you probe back and forth, it opens up the conversation, because you're reading a nonverbal that says to me, they're confused. Something, again, there's a little intuition here. You're just kind of noticing something's not quite right. They're being very short with me with their answers. Probe, ask more questions. Maybe, again, as we talked about a couple of classes ago, that the buyer has a sick relative at home that they're dealing with, and they got that baggage in their back of their mind when they're talking to you. That's emotional intelligence, to be able to pick that up, to know there's something going on here. Now, if they're a driver, they're not going to share that with you. If they're expressive, they might. So, they say, hey, it seems like I know you've told me you really like my product, but there just seems to be something that, that's uncertain in your mind. It's like, what is going on? Is there something else that I need to know, to help you with the situation? And they might say, you know what, I'm sorry, my car broke down, and I, just got the call from the car dealer, and it's $4,000, and I'm really bitter about that. Wow. They've just shared something with you, takes the tension away, uncovered more of what's happening. Boom, built trust, rapport, connected. And see, that's what probing questions kind of do. It's not perfect, right? We're not going to always uncover all these needs all the time. We're not going to always be able to solve their problems all the time, and who we're talking to and who we're communicating with. But it helps build the interest. It helps build the rapport and the connection. That could be, if it's your main objective to build the rapport, you've done that. But we got to assess reactions. Other ways to assess reactions. Think about this. Okay. I've done this as a new salesperson. I'll admit this. I was optimistic and thinking everybody was going to buy my product. So I would go there. I was selling the stains and the paints and the finishes for hardwood floors. It was one of my first sales jobs. So I'd go into a hardware store and I would hear that they would be like, oh, they would be thrilled to bring in all my products. That's what I heard. So I would follow up and I said, you said you wanted all 12 colors of the paint for this product. So that's each one is a box of 12. So that's 144 cans that I'm sending you. And they're going like, whoa, wait a minute. I never said I was going to get those. I said I was interested, but selective perception. We need to avoid that, because sometimes they say something and we want to hear that they want our product or they want our service or they want to like us. We hear that maybe, or, but think about this. If we're hearing that selective perception, are we really listening? Maybe half, right? So it becomes this ability. We really need to make adjustments. We really need to be adaptive at selling, so we don't make so many assumptions about what they want or what we're hearing. So we need to check. We need to check. So sometimes it's that we need to collect additional information. Okay, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's like, I go in there, this didn't work. I need to come up with a new strategy. I work with athletes. They play an opponent, it doesn't work. They need a new strategy, or maybe they need a new way of thinking, right? Just because it doesn't work this time doesn't mean it doesn't work next time. Or maybe you need to shift something, a different kind of question. So maybe you need to change the style of your presentation. Maybe you thought you were talking to a driver who wanted detail, but instead you misthought, and they're really expressive, and they really want to be built the rapport exceptionally to a high level before they're comfortable in giving you the business. Oh my gosh, wow, how did I not know that? So then I have to really rework the selling process. That's okay. That happens. Another thing to think about, we've talked about this, building credibility, right? Building credibility. So, you have this, okay, how do I make a good first impression? How do I uncover need? The credibility piece you're building out throughout the process. But I just want you to kind of see, if you're the kind of person that they think you lie a lot just to get the business, they're not going to believe you, right? Because maybe they believe their competitor telling them, well, you shouldn't trust Professor Todd because he always tells you he can do all these things and he really can't. In order to be credible, think about you're believable. Okay. I have a book for the work that I do, a published book. That builds believability, credibility. People then could trust, wow, let me see his book. Wow, there's good stuff in here. He must know at least some things, what he's talking about. The believability in a sales call is basically they trust you as a salesperson. They believe that you're honest. They believe your product is what you say it is, or your service. You can point to other people using it. So we must be perceived as having credibility. Maybe not from the absolute minute number one, but overall, they need to think this person I can trust, I can talk to them. They're going to be able to, maybe they don't have the perfect product for me, but I can trust them as a salesperson that they'll do their best to try to serve my needs. So obviously you need to offer, think about, again, these words should, it's funny how they put all these here. So we should, I think more often than not, we could try to give them evidence to back up what we're saying, right? If you just speak and say, we have the greatest product here, got so many happy customers, blah, 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 blah. My service is amazing, yada, yada, yada. They might not believe you, but if you say, you know what? Bill's been using my product for 9 years. Your employee in marketing has been using our software in his division. I would love to get my software in all the divisions of your company. That offers credibility. Boom, they're using it, seeing how that works. So they already have a level of trust. And it's not like you build credibility once and you're done. Obviously, you have to continually show up. And if you promise something, deliver. Or if you can't keep your promise, you better have a good reason why. And you be able to solve the problem, right? Credibility is important. And more beyond the credibility during the call, think about this. Some of these are like duh kinds of things, right? Avoid making statements that do not have a ring of truth. I mean, sometimes we say things to a friend or to somebody we're talking to that's kind of a half truth, right? Sometimes if I'm talking to other runners, because I'm a runner, and people always say, how fast you run a mile, how many miles you run, maybe, and I know I run a certain time or a certain amount of miles, maybe I can think of, there was 1 week where I ran an extra 5 miles. I could say, I run 30 miles a week to build some credibility. Now, if they say, tell me about your route, tell me about this or that. Oh, I run that route too. That's only 25 miles for a week. Oh. So obviously we want to be careful how we're talking to somebody and not speak falsehoods. Okay? Basic, right? Balance is important. It's in red here, balanced presentation. Show all sides of the situation. There might be, and this is very effective, you could be a really effective salesperson if you talk about some of the ways your product might not be the perfect product for everybody or the perfect service. Our service is a premium service. It's not for everybody. It's a high price, but there's so much value we offer, but it's not for everybody. There are some people that they don't have the budget to afford it. That is a balanced presentation. That shows credibility because it's like, now hopefully the person you're talking to can afford it, but maybe they can't, right? We talked about what is the definition of a good prospect? They can pay their bills. They buy their product or service, they can pay you. They have no money to pay. They can buy all they want. You'll be excited. And then if they're like, they don't pay their bills. They go bankruptcy. Boom. What good is that? Right? You're representing your company. You want a company that pays their bills. You're not just there to sell products. You're there to sell products to reputable buyers that pay their bills. I'm being kind of facetious in a way, but it's really the truth, honestly. Okay. Recognize that different cultures, obviously, people on the call here, we're from many different countries, right? We have different cultural differences. If I'm talking to somebody in a different country, I have some clients in India, there's certain things that they view in certain words and certain ways that I talk. I need to recognize that. If I start using language, I have some clients in Australia, and there's certain ways they talk, and they have certain phrases. Like I have some buddies in Australia that are clients now. I can call them buddies. They were prospects at one time. Now they're clients and friends, and they use the word ripper. That was a ripper. Like, what is a ripper? A ripper is like a really meaningful, powerful, sometimes funny event or something that happened. And so if I use that word with them, makes sense. If I use that with the people I'm talking to in India, like, what the heck is he talking about? Ripper. That was a ripper. Let me think, like Jack the Ripper. It's like, whoa. So it comes down to the thing about keep it simple. Credibility. You don't have to be complicated. Make statements that are truthful. Show that you're a good salesperson, that you do your homework, that you have good products or services that meet many needs, maybe not every one, but meet many needs. And keep it simple. If there's a problem with your product or service, you get it handled. That builds credibility. You could build more credibility that way than never having a problem at all. Think about that, okay? And obviously, I have a friend. He uses words that he hears on a TV or somebody else. He doesn't know the meaning of a lot of these words, honestly. It's okay, but it's like he's using these words to sound more important. And it's like, I think there's a word called a malapropism. You're using a word in the wrong context, and it becomes kind of funny. You don't want to use a word that the prospect looks at it, or the potential client or customer, that says, you know what, this person has no idea what they're talking about. That's the wrong context for that word. Okay, so keep it simple, right? Keep it simple. Other ways. Now, nowadays, we're doing a lot of stuff virtually. I'm teaching this class virtually. So some of these things, again, are pretty obvious. Others are, what do we need to consider when we're making a sales call virtually? Okay. Set up things effectively, professional looking. If you're going to dress like we're on a Zoom call, if I'm in a face-to-face meeting, I would still wear a button-down shirt with a collar in a sales call. Sometimes I might have a tie, usually not, but I might have a jacket, right? So think about professional looking background is you too, right? So think about, the sound, visual distractions. I closed the door to my office here, but sometimes it could be loud. You could be at home and you could be at the office in a call center, and you can hear people from the other places talking while you're on the phone with the credit card company, and you can hear 3 other conversations going on. Is that professional? Maybe that's all they have to deal with, but they better have a headset that filters that noise out. Maybe they don't have a good headset, right? Confirm available time. I mean, some of these are very basic things, but here's one that's a little bit different that you might not have thought about before. Sometimes we're talking to somebody and we don't realize that our screen or something is not fully visible, right? So I might be doing hand gestures below where you can see me, or I might be holding something up and you can only see half of it. So kind of think about how they're viewing. Obviously here I can see myself, right? So I know what you're seeing. But sometimes I might not look at that often. Sometimes there might be something over here that you're looking at that's distracting. Sometimes my audio might not be good. Put on the headset. So I need to be aware of those kinds of potential distractions, we'll call them, in the screen. right? Other things to kind of consider. Make visuals part of the presentation. And if we're using Zoom, here I'm using PowerPoint, right? Sometimes there's graphs, sometimes there's charts, sometimes there's just text. Sometimes I'm giving you examples about that. I'm making it more interesting, right? Again, if you think about it, I could just go through these slides, read everything in a monotone voice. You're all very kind. You may sit through the whole class, but you won't get much out of it. You'll be like, oh, he's boring. So you want to be thinking about when you're doing a virtual presentation, what makes you more interesting, lively? How can you engage the customer? Visuals, part of the presentation. If all of a sudden I get a text message and I'm answering it while I'm teaching the class, people do this all the time, right? You're with a friend, you're with somebody in your family, maybe, hopefully not a lot, but they're texting, they're on the phone, they're talking, they're reading something, they're reading a report while they're talking to you. Usually you can tell when somebody's doing something else while they're talking to you, even on the phone. What'd you say? Oh, yeah. We do that times too, right? Sometimes we do that. We get distracted. Be aware of those potential distractions. Assume others who are off the stream could be listening and advising the buyers. This is important. This is something we probably don't consider. You're talking to a potential client. There could be 3 people in the next room that is listening in on the conversation. They might be holding up signals. Yeah, keep them going. Or no, we don't want that. Okay. Again, if we know about that, we can maybe address that in a conversation. You might even joke. It depends how much you know the potential client. But you know what? I see you. Do you have anybody with you right now that I can't see? That's a harmless question. They might say no. They might say, yeah, Jack's in the other room and he's gonna, you know, chime in every once in a while. Or they might just say no, and they might still have people there. That might tell you something. But always know that if you're presenting something, there might be another person that you can't see that's there too. Okay, that's good to know. The phrase you could always have in the back of your mind, you're not just selling to the person on the screen, their boss might be behind them. If you think that way, you might present it more succinctly or more confidently, right? I don't want you to feel more pressure, but there's just a different way that we want to be thinking about these things. So let me we're going to close here in this class, and then we will have a little time to get into the next section about presentations, the next chapter. But selling to groups, okay, that's different. That's quite a bit different. And think about this: when we're talking to a group of people, when we're communicating with a group of friends, when we're making a presentation, there's other things to keep in mind. And I mentioned this at the very beginning, but just kind of think about this. I just want to kind of leave this. The book does a good job of talking about selling to groups, but I want to give you some sense of what is involved in that. Within the group, there's always somebody that's more in charge, right? There might be 2 or 3 people that are more in charge. There might be a silent person that is more in charge. So you need to consider that. Who are the people in the group that you're talking to also? Their status. Is there the manager or is it just employees? I was doing a presentation to people at NASA, okay, about using mindfulness at work. And it was mostly engineers. And so engineers, you think about more analytical, right? I think there's an engineer or 2 on this in this group. And so I'm giving data a little bit more. Then I realize, that the other people that are in the group that are important too, that are not engineers. And then I realized, so I changed, I adapted my communication style a little bit, remembering to cater the conversation to everyone. I have a friend, he says we need to be a person that can talk to all time zones at the same time. You need to be a person for all time zones. I'm doing that right now. Some of you are in the United States. You're on my time. Some of you are earlier. Some of you are much later. Some of you are at dinner time. I'm right about lunchtime now. And so it's like I need to be aware of that while I'm talking, because I might have a client that I'm talking to that's thinking about something else. They may be, as a metaphor would say, they may be in, have zoned out because they had a long day. And so they're in, 10 p.m. and they're not paying much attention to me. I want those people that are actively engaged, so I need to adjust my style. Think when you're selling in the group, receptivity, checking who's open to your ideas. You may have to present multiple ideas. You might need to be more knowledgeable because you might get asked more questions if you're selling to a group, right? So you might have to be better prepared. Think about if you're selling to a group, there might be 5 people you're selling to. They might all have different attitudes towards you, towards your company, towards your product, towards your service, towards the competitor that they're using. So just know that they all have different interests and concerns. That could be. So you may have to adjust your style and talk to, okay, what are the issues here about the service that you're having? There might be, again, one person that's the authority that speaks out, but you want to engage and see if there's any other things that people want to say that maybe they're not the first authority, but still important. Your job is to handle those. Okay? And know this. There will be, and when you're selling to a group, there will be, and when I'm presenting to a group, there will be at least one person that will be turned off by what you're saying or appear to be turned off by what you're saying. There always is, if it's more than like 4 people. And so, like, I was teaching a class at a community college, and there's like 20 people, 25 people, and there's always one that is like this in the back. Always. Will they give me a good evaluation? I don't care. But I want to be able to try to connect with them. And I'll tell you, sometimes those people that are sitting like that, after a while, you can connect with them in the deepest, most meaningful way. But there'll be resistance because they're asking you hard questions. They're asking you questions that you don't want to answer. Okay, you're selling us on this product. Tell us about times that your product didn't work with customers you had. Because I guarantee you, somebody's might ask that question. Well, yeah, we had this problem with one of the clear finishes that we had. I think I shared the story with you. It turned everything milky white on this customer's home. But I'll tell you how we solved that problem. And we gave that new product, and when we pay for them to boom. So you turn resistance into something you could use, and you are more powerful as a communicator and a salesperson. And so then you think about these other things when you're selling to groups. You might have multiple objectives to connect with different people. Sometimes you want to avoid certain ways of presenting to a group, right? You don't want to be boring. You don't want to give a speech per se. You want to maybe encourage feedback and dialogue. Learn the names of group members. That can't always be the case, right? You might be speaking to 12 different people, and it's the first time. They don't all have name tags or nameplates, but you can try to figure some of those people, the names out. When they ask a question, what's your name? Oh, hi, Jill. Yeah, let me answer that question for you. Okay. And then you're listening carefully. You're paying attention to nonverbals, all those things we talked about. All those things. All right. Any questions about the selling process as we get into the sales call, that piece? Again, think about this. The biggest part of the getting into the sales conversation in that when we're making the sales call, I think, is the questioning and getting at the needs, the need behind the need. If you can ask good questions, you uncover needs, you can be a very effective communicator, very effective salesperson. All right. So I'm going to share, we'll get started in the next chapter, because it kind of relates to all of what we're talking about here in terms of presenting, in terms of doing a good job, and, you know, um, being better at presenting, being better at communicating. In other words, strengthening the presentation. How do you strengthen your presentation? Okay. So think about certain things as salespeople, as communicators. How can we enhance our verbal skills, the verbal tools we have? How can we use those to strengthen a presentation? The different words we use, how we put things in there. And why is it? This is a good question here. Why is it that salespeople need to augment their verbal oral communication with other things? Why would you need samples or testimonials or to demonstrate what you got or visual aids? Maybe not always, but why should you? And then what are the methods available? This is really the key. What are the methods available? How do we strengthen a presentation so that our potential client understands and we get at their needs, we uncover objections, we uncover the need behind the need, all that's most important. We share those features that are most important and the benefits, the value that they're getting. How do we strengthen all that whole process? And then if we think about it, how can we use visual aids, technology more effectively? What are the ingredients to a good demonstration? Again, if you don't have a product or service and you don't need to demonstrate, but there's maybe some qualities that might help you as you think about that. Is there a better way to quantify our solution to the buyer? We talked a lot about metaphors and analogies. Maybe there's a way you can put it in words and frame it that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, this is important, right? Getting nervous. Maybe we feel nerves. Maybe we feel jitters. How can we lower those? I can give you some really good tools for that. Okay. Probably won't get into that today, but next Tuesday, we are meeting next Tuesday. So know that. Plug in for next Tuesday. And then we'll meet on Saturdays again for 2 weeks. But next week is Tuesday. No meeting on Saturday. What is a good presentation? What is a strong presentation? What does that mean? Okay. From the standpoint of the last chapter that we talked about, right? We're making a good first impression. We're getting their attention, right? We want to get good attention. So we want to keep their attention. A good presentation keeps their attention. Maybe not 100% of the time, but more often. It obviously improves the buyer's understanding. If you have a good, strong presentation, it helps the buyer to understand the benefits, the value you bring, your company brings, your product, service, consulting, whatever brings. And it appeals in a multitude of ways. This multi-sensory appeal is important. So it's not just you show them what's going on, but you actually get them maybe to try your service. They can feel it. Maybe they hear from other people that have used it, right? Multi-sensory. It helps the buyer remember what you're saying. Absolutely. Maybe you use lots of acronyms. You break things down. Offers proof that you know what you're talking about. Testimonials show that you know what you're talking about. Here's the reason why the quality of our product is so high. And that is important for you, I know, but this is the reason why. And it backs that up, offers a sense of value. Okay. So this is kind of interesting. Think about this, how we learn, right? This is an interesting kind of thing to think about of how we learn. The visual system in our brain uses, this is probably why it's 80%, about 75% of all the energy. This is kind of an aside, but this is the reason why. 75% of the energy in our brain is devoted to the way we see things, to our sight. That's a big portion of the energy in our brain. We've got two eyes, we see a lot if we're not visually impaired. 80% or more is sight. Now, if you're not sighted, right, you're visually impaired, hearing will be higher. Okay, so I want to make sure that, but usually we learn, first we see, then we hear. Some people touch, taste, smell. This is general, okay? But when we talk about multisensory learning, right, think about this. I'm talking. That's sound. I'm communicating through visual, right? Whether it's slides or me explaining something, that's sight. Obviously, I can't get you to taste something unless I say, okay, everybody take a drink of your liquid right now and whatever. But I can get you to touch something, right? To touch a book, to touch the screen, to touch a product. All right, everybody grab a pen and touch that. What are the qualities of a pen? We can do a lot. All right. As we talk about how to strengthen a presentation, think about this. We're using imagination and creativity. We may not be the most creative person in the world. That's a mindset. But we probably could be more creative if we needed to be. So if we're more using our imagination, creative, we can make an impression on the customer, be more vivid, right? Make a strong presentation. We need to consider different methods and different media for addressing their needs. We can't maybe just talk about it. Maybe we've got to show them, right? Maybe we got to show them our software. Maybe we got to give them our software to use, to see in the presentation, right? I'm demonstrating my software. Maybe I sell PowerPoint slides, this presentation software. I need to let you play with it, right? Maybe I need to do that. Maybe I need to give you this slide presentation, which I do. It is in Moodle. So you can go through it ahead of time. Maybe. That's how you need to, be addressed in that way. But think about this. Social styles, right? We talk about social styles. Strengthening a presentation, if we know who's there, if we know their social style, we can key in on certain things that those styles like more than others. Expressives. They like strong, intense colors. Remember, they're expressive. They like emotion, right? They like visuals, cartoons, positive images. They don't like all the charts and graphs if they're black and white. An analytical boy, they want clean and simple. They don't want a lot of fluff. Don't give them a lot of graphics, right? Amiables, they prefer visuals with people, right? So you want to talk about all the other customers that you've satisfied. And maybe you talk about the visuals. You put the faces of all the companies that you have with the people. They're all satisfied customers. Drivers, they're like analyticals in a sense. They want crisp, professional looking things, right? Bold lettering. Highlight the points. They want to get to the point, boom, 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 boom. They're not an amiable that doesn't need all that. Amiables, again, they would like a slow presentation. Drivers, you speak, maybe not 200 words a minute, but you speak to the point and you go through it quickly. Now, again, group presentation, you got all these different styles there. You got to think about how you can cater to all these different styles in the same presentation. Makes it a little more complicated, but you can do it. Absolutely. So consider this when you're strategizing. It includes two, how many people will be there? I just said it, right? 2, 1, 37. What does the stage look like? Meaning, what is the setting? Is it a conference room? Is it their office? Is it a lunchroom? Is it virtual? What is the stage that buyers are in? What is the information that people need? So this is kind of the planning process. You think about, okay, what do they need to know? I prepare that. And what type of situation is, meaning that, are they an existing client that I'm making another presentation? Are they brand new, have never seen my product, me, or my company before? That makes a difference in how I prepare, right? Tools to help strengthen the presentation. We'll go through a few of these and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. Verbal tools, word pictures, and stories, humor. So we talked about, again, think about if they're all drivers, are they going to want a lot of word pictures and stories? Maybe they want a little humor. That might be okay, but maybe they don't want a lot of that stuff. But if you use stories, and I tell you stories, and I've told you stories, you remember things. They make things more lively. We remember the stories people share. Maybe not all the details, but we remember the stories. So if you're good at telling stories about how your product or service handles the needs of customers in certain ways, you tell a story about a certain customer that had a problem and you were able to solve it, they remember that. Visual tools. Yeah, think about, you're giving a presentation. It may not be a sales presentation. It may be to your boss or to your colleagues or to somebody else. Graphs, charts, visual tools. There's lots of visual tools. A visual tool we may not think about are the actual maps, displaying visual using media. You can actually, take somebody to the internet and show them a website and show them things. And, one of my sons is taking a class in college about national parks. It's virtual, but they're using Google Earth and they're using all kinds of satellite images and things and to kind of 3D or 4D go into the park. Cool stuff. I know there's realtors and they do this virtual staging. So they have a presentation to a potential client, a realtor, and the house is empty. You may have seen this before. You may have purchased a house like this. The house is empty, but it would be cool to see how furniture looked in there. Maybe not your furniture, but something. So virtually, they go in and digitally put in couches and rugs and paintings and appliances and whatnot. And all of a sudden, you see a potential of what the room might look like. And you're like, you're seeing the room and then you're seeing the virtual. And you're like, I can now imagine me and my stuff here. Might give you good ideas. That's the potential to help strengthen a presentation. And so we might even have this portfolio, which is collection of things, right? Think about this. You're building a portfolio to support your product, your service, your consulting, your business, you as an employee. We all have portfolios, the work we've done, good, bad, testimonials, whatever it is. There could be video, there could be papers. So that portfolio are visual aids you can share with people. Letters from customers that have been satisfied with your product. Sometimes that's important. Other times it's not. But you can have a few with you that I can show you, that I can share with you. That might make the difference to strengthen my presentation, because that's what we're talking about. In my portfolio, right? Think about, if I'm doing a lot of presentations, I might need a projector I might have to project my screen and they don't have a projector on the wall. So there's portable projectors. I might need that, right? So there's lots of tools we can use to help us have a stronger presentation. Let me cover a few more of these and then we'll wrap it up. Digital collateral materials. This is the lingo in sales asset management systems. Okay, sales asset management systems. I mean, basically what that is information that is systematized to help your potential client, customer see the value of what you got. So you might have all of your products on a flash drive. That's a sales asset management system, a flash drive with all your products and services that your customer can pop in their computer, that you show them, that you're sharing with them. And it's a list of everything if they need it. It might have all the specifications and the background information and the extra features. You might have that. That could be collateral material that you leave that's digitized for them. Okay. And that might be really important. It might not. Other documents that are designed to generate sales, right? What could those be? What could other documents designed to generate sales be? Documents about satisfied customers, documents about who's using your products, you're selling to government, and you've already sold your software to 9 local government agencies. This is more of a national agency, but you can say here, you can see this. These are the purchase orders from all the other local municipalities using our software and how it's worked for them. Because they have, when you're selling to governments, there's a certain process that they have to bid and it might take a little longer. That might be the information you need. You're building a portfolio. Think about that. Simplify the collection. You don't want thousands of documents. You want what's most important. So when I go to a potential client, okay, I have a lot of things with me. I might bring a copy of my book or the card deck that's around the book, or visuals to talk about the brain and talk about the mind, or testimonials from potential clients, or I might be able to link something on their phone to my website or to a video that I'm showing them. There's lots of possibilities. I'm in, I wouldn't say I'm in, sales mode every moment of every interaction that I have, but I am always in communication mode. I'm always trying to be a better communicator, a better presenter, stronger. And so here you're just thinking about, what is my portfolio? What is my collection? If you're interviewing for a job, you have your resume, and on your resume, it has certain experiences that you had. You may also have a letter of reference from somebody. You may also have a portfolio if you're an artist of your work, or satisfied clients already. There's lots of things. So you start to think about it. So media tools, what are the media tools we use? There's lots of stuff we can use, right? I mean, document cameras, visual presenters, we talked a little bit about that, 3D imaging, whiteboards, smart boards. I even have I don't have it here, I may somewhere, an actual, whiteboard, not electronic, but that you put with markers. It's a small one. And sometimes when I'm working with a client, I use that and write things down, because then you could erase it. Doesn't all have to be multimedia, digitized, but it could be. I want you to think about all the visuals that are possible. And this last thing, I'll share this and then we'll continue this next Tuesday. product demonstrations. And you're not always demonstrating a product in the presentation when you're talking to somebody, but you might be. You might have bought a new phone, and you might be talking to a friend of yours or a colleague that's looking for a new phone. That could be you're demonstrating the product for them. Again, it's not always in a selling situation. We come across these situations all the time. But we want to, as we're doing these, be effective. What does it look like to be effective? Prepared. Got to know what you're doing. You got to have a proper place to demonstrate, right? If you're showing your phone, you got to have an internet connection or good Wi-Fi, good data connection, right? Check the equipment. Certainly, I've had presentations where, I forgot. I did this one. I was doing a program, and I forgot the cable connection from my laptop into the projector for an HDMI cable. I actually had the cable. I didn't have the connector into my computer. That was a problem. I was driving to Best Buy early that morning. It hadn't opened yet. What I did was I used the client's computer. Fortunately, I was prepared. I had my presentation on a flash drive to use somebody else's computer. You got to be thinking as we prepare of potential issues that might arise. Like there's in the United States, there's an old saying that the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts would say, be prepared, right? How well can you be prepared? It says it right here, right? To be effective, be prepared for all eventualities. I mean, I bring duct tape with me in presentations because sometimes there's cables on the ground. People might trip. I secure those. I bring a clicker so I can use my presentation from remote, right? I bring extra batteries in case the clicker batteries are broken. I bring extra handouts. They said there will only be 20 people. There were 27. I always err on the side of extra handouts if I'm giving people workbooks or something, right? Be prepared. Check the equipment before. Relate your products to their needs. That's pretty basic, right? What are their needs? Need behind the needs. If you're going to do a presentation, talk to what they need and make that integral part of the presentation. Don't just talk about what you love to talk about. Talk about what the buyer, whoever you're presenting to, what's most important to them. Now, if they hire you to give them like sometimes they hire me to do a talk, to do a, program, it's my stuff, but I still want to make sure it's interesting to the audience. So I might interview some of the people in the audience beforehand, right? I'm gathering data, and I use that information in my product presentation or my speech. Keep it simple, keep it concise, keep it concise, clear. Again, basic things, but I want you to have that's it. We're going to stop right there. There's more to share. We'll finish that up on Tuesday, but start to think about this. Again, we're not all salespeople. We're not all going to be in sales, but start to think about the kinds of questions we ask. I'm kind of recapping some of the important themes here. Open and closed-end questions. How we're listening, how we're building rapport with whoever it is we're talking, or how we're not building rapport. What is that about? Maybe I'm not doing enough listening. Maybe I'm distracted. Maybe they're distracted. Maybe the setting, the environment is not the perfect place to talk. You need to go somewhere else, right? So start to think about questions we're asking, uncovering need, the need behind the need. Get real good at being able to pick up on nonverbal cues, being able to get good at understanding that you don't have all the answers. You might not know every question to ask in the initial call. That's okay. Be prepared. Be prepared to not know everything. Be prepared to have backup. Be prepared to understand that they may you're doing a presentation to somebody. There may be somebody behind the screen that you can't see. Be prepared for that. Be prepared for these crazy questions we sometimes get asked as salespeople or people. Tell me about yourself, or some off-the-wall question about your service or product. So that's my message for you today. And in terms of the presentation styles, we're not going to be perfect. We're going to learn. We're going to get better. But think about, as we're doing a presentation, verbally, digitally, in person, wherever, key in on the needs of who you're talking to. It's not only for us, it's more for them. And so as we frame what we're talking to, we can have a really good presentation, a very strong presentation. Just got to back it up, right? So that's all I have for you in this class today. This was a fun one. I think getting into the sales call about what we actually do. I mean, we've been talking about some of these concepts, and now it's like we're there. We're talking to the person. How do we adjust, right? We're adaptive. New questions, different questions, uncovering needs, right? Remember the spin selling, Neil Rackham's book. That could be helpful. All right, so that's it. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be back next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Any questions, as always, feel free to send me in the WhatsApp group. There's chapters 8 and 9. There's a quiz. Keep an eye on that. Next week, we'll get into chapter 10. So there'll probably be a quiz, a very short one on that material. Most of you got the assignments in, or at least they've been graded. Those that haven't, we'll still look at those, but they will be assessed accordingly because they're late. Okay. So still get them in, still send them in, but you might not get full marks because they're a few days late. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you being here today for this class, and see you next Tuesday. All right. Bye, everyone. You're welcome. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone.